All right, so today we're talking about President John Adams, and he is the second president of the United States after George Washington leaves office. Our lesson objective today is students will be able to describe the events leading to the XYZ affair and why Adams was not reelected as president for his second term. When we talk about John Adams, I kind of always like to put him kind of like in the shadows. You know, you got to fill in some shoes after having a president that was so successful, and so to kind of make it easy, kind of do a comparison between Joe Montana and Steve Young. Obviously, Joe Montana is a Hall of Famer quarterback for the 49ers. He's been there for 12 years before traded to the Kansas City Chiefs. And the guy who had to fill in his shoes after he was traded was Steve Young, who was at the time an unproven quarterback. Didn't really have that much experience in the pro levels. He was drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they traded away to 49ers to back up Joe Montana for those, I think, 3 years. Steve Young, even though he was a successful quarterback, always lived in the shadows of Joe Montana. It was just one of those things where if you have someone who's so great, such a great leader, the people are going to respect the person who's proven. Kind of like we did with George Washington. You have George Washington who's a proven leader, and so it's really hard to replace him, especially with someone like John Adams, who really hasn't been much in the public eye, you know, after the Revolutionary War. Yes, he was the vice president, but really didn't have a lot of power as vice president. So when people elect him as, you know, the next president of the United States, we're wondering, what does he have to offer? So that's kind of the deal. He has to live or trying to get his way out of the shadows of George Washington. Little quick review. Remember, President George Washington is our first president. His VP was John Adams, who is siding with the Federalists. His political beliefs are going with the Federalist side. The first cabinet, we have the Treasury with Hamilton, who is a Federalist. He's the leader of the Federalist Party. Department of State is Thomas Jefferson, who is a Republican. And we have Henry Knox, who will knock you out in any war because he is Department of War. Here is the comparison chart of Federalists and Republicans. If you are a Federalist, you like the National Bank, you want a commitment or an alliance with the British country. The wealthy people are your supporters. You have a loose interpretation of the Constitution. That also means implied powers. And you believe that the industry and factories are the future of the United States. Talking about Republicans, they do not like the National Bank because it's not written in the Constitution. They want a French alliance because they helped us out in the Revolutionary War. The economic class that would support the Republicans are the lower to middle class. When reading the Constitution, they would read it word for word, mostly because they're scared of tyranny, so they don't want to open the door for any tyrannical power whatsoever. They also believe that the future for the United States to gain the most money would be cash crops because, well, that's what's worked so far. I mean, essentially, Thomas Jefferson grew up growing tobacco. He knows the background with the necessity of cash crops, so he goes with what he knows. He believes cash crops are the future. Today we're talking about, you know, the French and why they're upset with us, and kind of set that up. Remember, France is upset because we make a treaty with Britain during their war with Britain called Jay's Treaty. If you remember, Britain was impressing our merchants, forcing them to fight in the British Army against France. So we make a treaty with them, Jay's Treaty. We agree not to go to war with them and to step away and, you know, kind of mind our own business. But France looks at that like a stab in the back because they helped us out in the Revolutionary War, and here we are not helping them during their time of war. So that's why I have this little bubble saying you will pay America from a French individual, because they are going to attack us down the line. The big idea today is that John Adams is a Federalist president. He is the first president to pick a political party and win under the Federalist group. France is upset about Jay's Treaty and retaliates against the U.S. The XYZ affair stirs anti-French sentiment in the U.S., and Adams signs a treaty with France that upsets Americans, which will probably cost him his second term. The election of 1796, Adams, who is a Federalist, is versus Thomas Jefferson, who's a Republican. Adams will win this election, but because Thomas Jefferson comes in second place, he is the vice president. Remember, that's how it used to be back then. If you were in second place, you were automatically the vice president, which leads to conflict, because what you would see is there's a lot of potential for, you know, kind of collusion or any, you know, problems with two sides, you know, having two politically different ideas. they're going to go against each other in a lot of things. You know, Thomas Jefferson's going to call out John Adams in public, and it's going to make John Adams look weak because essentially, you know, you have two leaders of this country who don't agree with each other. So that's kind of the reason why we have this question, you know, what could potentially happen when you have two leaders who have two politically different ideas. They're going to get in a lot of fights with each other. And so that's kind of the reason why, you know, George Washington said, don't have any political parties. It's for this reason. President John Adams, before he was president, he served 2 terms as vice president. He is a Federalist president, and he was also one of the leading people to signing the peace treaty in the Treaty of Paris that ended the Revolutionary War. Now, this next event is the XYZ affair. All right, the XYZ affair happens this way. France is upset about Jay's treaty that we established with Britain. They feel like we stabbed them in the back. So they retaliate by basically attacking our merchant ships. They start to impress our merchant ship. Remember, impressment is taking our merchants and forcing them to fight in their war. Now, Adams wants this to stop. So he sends 3 diplomats down to France, and he is going to try to resolve this through a treaty. The surprise is, and this is why we call this the XYZ affair, is that there's 3 individuals, 3 French agents, and we just call them X, Y, and Z because we don't know their name, but they asked for a bribe. The bribe, I believe, comes out to $25,000. And this is just to talk to their foreign minister, Talleyrand, to come up with a peace treaty. This isn't guaranteeing a peace treaty. They're asking us for a bribe. And so this really upsets the American people because we're America. Well, I mean, essentially, you don't ask for bribes with us. We don't pay ransoms. And so after this event, the Americans and John Adams are so upset that we need to figure what to do. Here's a quick little video talking about the XYZ affair.
Angry at U.S. neutrality in the British-French conflict, the French had attacked a number of American ships. It was a big problem for President John Adams. The French keep attacking American ships. What shall I do? I must send smart diplomats to negotiate with French Foreign Minister Charles Maurice de Talleyrand Perigord. We are 3 smart diplomats. We want to negotiate. Send us to France. My dream has come true. Surely Charles Pinckney, John Marshall, and Elbridge Gerry will successfully negotiate. Well, what are you waiting for? Get to work. We're like diplomats. Here come the foreign minister's representatives. Thus report to them as XYZ. So you want us to leave your ships alone? Yes, we do. How much? I'd say pretty much. Enough to offer us a bribe. Because now, France is a powerful country. You better pay. Rather fight an expensive war than pay you some stupid bribe. Please say millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. You'll be sorry. When Americans got word of how disrespectfully they'd been treated by the French, many wanted to go to war. George Washington was ready to come out of retirement to lead the army. Adams, however, tried further negotiation, and this time, France treated America seriously. The XYZ affair, so named because that's how Americans referred to the French representatives who demanded a bribe, showed the world that the United States demanded to be treated with respect.
So, you would think that because the American people are so upset that we would automatically go to war with France. That's not the case. In fact, Adams continues to want to have peace. He's listening to George Washington's farewell address. Remember, Washington said, you can't go to war. We can't cost war. We don't have enough money. We have a national debt that we're trying to pay off. We don't have enough people in the army. And we really don't have, the skill level right now to go to war. And so he continues pushing for peace. Because of that, the American people are starting to get upset with him because he's making us look weak. All right? So, we're going to establish a navy. We're going to start covering our backs. We're going to try to protect our merchant ships so they're not attacking our merchants anymore. So we establish a navy. We're going to increase the size of our army. Even though we do these things, we're still not pushing for war. We're continuing to push for peace. So, because Adams looks weak and he makes our country look weak, people are saying some nasty things about him in the newspapers. They call him a girl. They say he's weak leader. They say all sorts of things about him, and it really upsets Adams. So he passes the Alien and Sedition Act. The Alien Act says that he can get rid of any person who is not an American citizen and kick them back to their home country. The reason why he's doing that is because Philadelphia has about 25,000 French agents there, and he's really scared that those French people would be spies. So he passes the Alien Act. The Sedition Act is a response to the newspapers insulting him. So he basically says that no one can say anything against the government. Now, the American response to this is it's unconstitutional. The Alien and Sedition Act is violating the Bill of Rights. You know, you have your natural rights as citizens. You have the First Amendment right of freedom of press and freedom of speech. And so President Adams is going to get in a lot of trouble for that because he basically is violating the Constitution. The people who get him in trouble with this is going to be the government. But you have TJ and Madison who both believe that their acts are unconstitutional. And so what ends up happening is that they draft a Virginia and Kentucky resolution and they fight the Alien Sedition Act and they both win. And so Adams publicly looks like a tyrant king, and then people don't trust him anymore. So Adams, what he's going to do is he's going to finally make a peace treaty with France. He decides that, you know, peace is necessary because we don't have money, we don't have the resources, we need to have a peace treaty. Had he gone to war with France, he probably would have been reelected. The American people would have seen him as a hero, kind of like President George Bush after 9/11. We went to war, he looked like the man. Everyone trusted him, everyone gave him so much power, and that's why he was easily reelected. The same thing would have happened with Adams. Unfortunately for him, he does not go to war. He decides that a peace treaty is needed. In the 1800s, it's signed, and Adams is not reelected. He basically sacrifices his reelection. But again, historians look at Adams and say, you know what? He made the right decision. At the time, we were extremely poor. We don't have a large enough army. We probably would have lost that war, and we probably could have lost the United States to the French. So it was probably a good idea he didn't. At the time, he looked weak, but historians would say he made one of the smartest decisions in history. This is the sequence of events that happens. This is what you should know. U.S. establishes Jay's Treaty with Britain, which leads to France being upset with us, which leads to them impressing our merchants by taking over their ships, which leads to the XYZ affair, those three agents asking for a bribe. Adams continues to want peace with France. He establishes peace, and he loses his re-election.